Hello and welcome to Book Lust. I'm Nancy Pearl. My guest today at University Bookstore is author Brenda Peterson. Brenda, thank you so much for coming by today to talk. You've written many books and they've been both fiction and nonfiction, and I know you have some new stuff down the pipeline, as they say. Your newest book is I Want to Be Left Behind, which I was very moved by when I read. And it's partly a memoir, partly an environmental. It just brings together a lot of disparate things to make a whole. And will you talk about how you came to write it, what it was like writing about your family,
Yes.
all of those sorts of things?
I never thought I would write another memoir. I did a first memoir called Build Me an Ark, A Life with Animals. And a long time ago when I was working at the New Yorker, when in my 20s, I swore that I would never write first person because I thought it was narcissistic, and I was a great believer in the omniscient narrators. So to have written two memoirs is a bit of a lesson for me in never saying never. But it really is about finding reasons to be left behind. And I wrote it because I began when Bush was in the presidency, and I could see, unlike my liberal friends, and I am very much a liberal, that our foreign policy and much of our environmental policy was being driven by end times philosophy. And when I'd talk about it, my friends would say, oh, well, that's stupid. And then I'd say to them, 55% of Americans believe in the rapture. And then they started listening, because only 38% believe in evolution. So I felt like I had a responsibility to talk from within this tradition with a sense of humor, and I hope compassion and tenderness, because it is my family. This has a very duck and cover voice. In fact, of all my books, and all my books have somewhat different voices, this is the most like duck and cover. It has a kind of, I hope, fond and funny detachment. I call it my divine dark comedy of family and faith. And I hear that in my head, and then I know, oh, this is that voice. And it'll either be in memoir or fiction.
Because when I read this book, I felt like I knew you, and we had met a few times before that, but I didn't feel I knew you until I read this book. And then I could hear your voice, or what I imagined was your voice coming through in the book.
That's lovely. I think I didn't know me until I wrote this book. I had approached this family in duck and cover, and I didn't know who I was until I wrote this. And what I realized is that I'm not a tragic character. I'm not in that tragic Christian tradition of a sacrificial savior who basically destroys himself for others. I'm more in the tradition of someone who sees life as a divine comedy and sees myself as a comic, picaresque character. This is a very, Diane Ackerman was the first to read it, and she said, oh, Brenda, you're a picaresque character. And I said, thank God I figured that out, because the comedy of survival, if everything is tragic, if all we can respond with is a sense of, on one hand, extinction, or on the other hand, in religion, damnation, we have limited, fear constricts, tragedy constricts. It's an end game. But play is infinite, and comedy always ends in some sort of communion or reunion or wedding. So I really have apprenticed myself to the comic tradition, and it ain't easy. It's like compassion. That's the compassion 101 is the hardest thing I ever signed up for. Like the Buddhists say, if you ever think you've reached enlightenment, spend a week with your family.
Or think again.
Think again. Yes.
So are you, in your heart of hearts, you're hopeful?
Yes. But it's hard-won hope. It's not Hallmark card hope. And I think one of the reasons why my work is a little more complicated and why I wanted this to be accessible is that Emily Dickinson says hope is a thing with feathers that perches in the soul and never stops. and I'm with her.